To properly understand the East Village, it helps to look at its widest context, in Stratford and beyond. The buildings you see today are only part of a much longer process of transformation. The area is defined by railways. In the 19th century, it was one of the densest concentrations of railway manufacturing in London. In the late 20th century, the construction of new high-speed rail systems made everything you see on the site today possible. The creation of these systems is transforming the map of Europe, bringing cities increasingly close together and blurring national boundaries. At a regional scale, the high-speed line is the spine around which the expansion of London towards the Thames Gateway is made possible. In a physical sense, the tunnelling work under London has literally shaped the site. The tunnelling machine started at Stratford and headed east and west. The creation of a new international station put the site at the intersection with the Lee Valley to create a ripple effect of wider regeneration. None of this would be possible with a single line of infrastructure. It works at Stratford because it sits on top of so many other existing and planned systems. The original site footprint is vast. When you overlay Oxford Street, you can understand its scale and urban ambition. It also shows the importance of streets and squares, lasting longer than buildings, and the idea of different districts of the city with varying character and functions. The scale of the project grew with the ambition of the local authority, the original developers, the emergence of the GLA, and national urban policy. The original master plan showed a vision for how the site could develop with the market over maybe 20 or 30 years. It looked at the relationship of the site to water all the way down to the Thames, creating visual connections to the City of London cluster and to Canary Wharf, locking the site into its wider relationships, and linking to the ecology of the Lee Valley Park. For all these reasons, the creation of a landscape structure was integral to the original master plan, with West 8 playing a key role in the process, illustrating the diverse qualities of open space across the site. There was extensive public consultation and key physical constraints to overcome. The project set out an ambition for a diversity of building types and scales, varying in height between centre and edge, with a major retail district linking to the existing town centre. The vision for the project was established, and the project had already been submitted for planning when London started bidding for the Games. There was a good fit between the projects, as it was helpful for the bid to be seen to be supporting ongoing regeneration, and there was a natural alignment between the requirement for athletes' accommodation and the residential districts that had already been planned. The success of the bid meant a massive acceleration of the original plans, but the key objective was to deliver the functional short-term requirements of the Games, but to prioritise the long-term ambitions that had preceded the bid. In doing so, we had new opportunities to embed the project in its surroundings, and to embed the legacy sporting venues within a properly urban context. We spent a great deal of time learning from the predecessor villages, each of which had to meet the same brief, but in very different ways that reflected their city's particular characteristics. In many ways, Barcelona is still seen as the best model for us to follow. The key issue here was delivering the appropriate long-term residential buildings, together with the necessary areas for temporary facilities and short-term infrastructure. We had to consolidate and accelerate the next scales of the planning process, and set the brief and framework for multiple architects working in parallel. Vogt developed designs for the site-wide landscape that will tie the village together, creating a framework of streets and open spaces, within which communal courtyards provide amenity for residents, alongside social and community infrastructure, and the language of familiar streets. What has been so unusual about the project has been the way in which we've had to cope with dramatic changes in timing, in the response to economic context, working in parallel scales from the regional and the temporal to establish a master plan within which we have had to work at the scale of tactile detail, and to create a maturity and quality of landscape that will feel significant from day one. Looking at the site from the air, you can see its scale and character before the modern railway work began, with the views towards the City of London created by the line of the Grand Union Canal. To the south, with the kilometre-long station box under construction, you can see Canary Wharf cluster on the skyline, and to the north, the lush quality of the Lee Valley Park, hidden from its surrounding population by the railway lines around the site. The spoil from the tunnelling work literally created a new landscape on the site, lifting it by an average of 7 metres. 3 million cubic metres of soil across the site lifted the area out of the floodplain and enabled bridge and road connections over the railway tracks around the edges. When the Olympic project started, they had to catch up, with the process of demolition, remediation and sculpting the adjacent landscape, undergrounding power cables up the valley. Early work for the village involved infrastructure, railway edges and new bridge structures, enabling the building development plots to be created. The process quickly settled into 3 vast construction projects operating side by side, with the village adjacent to Westfield, which was growing most quickly as they worked towards an earlier completion date, and the landscape and buildings across the Olympic Park. At its peak, there were thousands of people and dozens of cranes on site, just within the village. More than 30,000 people have been inducted, and more than 25 million man-hours have been worked to construct the project. As the landscaping goes into place, the project is moving from construction site into an urban environment ready to be occupied. It is an incredible project to be part of. Seeing the translation from long-term plan to built reality in such a compressed period is an incredibly rare opportunity. It has been a phenomenal process so far. In many ways, it is only the start of the story of even longer-term change in Stratford and across East London.